Hello, First United Methodist Church and the greater community. This is Zach Hymack with Eckert Public Library, and today we're going to do a program on the history of the Methodist Church. The First United Methodist Church is the oldest church in Auburn, and a few years ago, Sharon Zonker approached us about digitizing some of the original records, pictures, and documents of the church. The church has a history going back over 175 years and obviously has had a lot of influence and impact in the community. So as part of that project, we received a grant from the Indiana State Library, and we were able to digitize over 800 original documents, pictures, and artifacts from the church that are now available to view online on our online photo archive, as well as over at the Genealogy Center. So we wanted to have a program to sort of connect those documents and pictures to the church's history. And just a final note, this is not really original research. This is all drawn from the church's records themselves, which are over at the Genealogy Center to view for anybody. So we hope you enjoy the program, and this is How Deep Do These Roots Grow? Auburn's Earliest Churches and Their Impact. So in 1836, Wesley Park arrives and builds a cabin in the land which will become Auburn, Indiana. In 1839, 3 years later, an itinerant preacher by the name of Samuel Reed, assisted by Wesley Park, organizes the first Methodist class in Auburn, and that founds what will become the First United Methodist Church. You can see there pictures of Sophia Park and Wesley Park, who were married, and Fanny Smith was the third member of the church. 2 years later, 1841, the church has doubled its congregation to 6 members. In 1844, the first courthouse is built, and multiple denominations are holding services in that building. Interestingly, when the second courthouse was built, the first one was used for a grand bonfire at the rally celebrating the surrender of Richmond by the Confederates. 1847, the Auburn Sunday School class had memorized and recited almost 4,000 verses of Scripture and read 5,000 pages of the Bible. And in 1848 and 49, the first Methodist church is built on the corner of 7th and Cedar on a lot donated by the Parks, and it was the first church building in the whole town. So there's some newspaper records of the story of the early church, as well as a drawing of the original church building. As we reach the mid-1800s, obviously a distinctive time in American history, there's some really neat notes about the preachers of the time. Reverend Ham was the preacher when there was a change in sentiment on the slavery question. He became an ardent abolitionist, a strong debater on the subject. Reverend Lynch was also a staunch and fervent unionist, and many, in fact, left the church because of disagreeing with his ardent loyalty to the Union cause. Reverend Lamport and Reverend Cohn, also very distinctive preachers with strong sermons. Mrs. Cohn as well, a very talented woman and a leader in prayer and revival meetings. And there's just some neat comments about the pastors of the times from the church records. So through the last few decades of the 1800s, there's an extended revival meeting. A lot of new church members. Approaching the 1890s, the church membership increases from 207 to 350 members. And in 1890, work begins on a new church building. And on February 22nd of 1891, the First Methodist Episcopal Church building was dedicated at 808 South Van Buren Street. And there's an article from the Auburn Courier of the time about that dedication. So it's kind of interesting what the contemporary comments say about the church. And the building of it was generally considered as much larger than justified or necessary. And it was a notable event in the county and was contributed by many citizens and organizations outside the church's membership. There's a picture of the sanctuary. There was seating for 500 in the general auditorium, 200 in the lecture room, 100 in the balcony, along with choir rooms. I won't go through this whole story, but some of you may know it, and it's about Dr. Charles Payne of New York City, a famous preacher who came for the dedication the night before. The congregation still needed $8,500 in pledges, and Payne criticized the church for going so far to build an unnecessarily large church, considering the financial resources of the community. So Mrs. Harder and Mrs. Robbins go door to door at midnight and start waking people up, trying to get them up to make midnight pledges. There's a meeting in a locked room in the church, and more than $12,000 in pledges were made on the weekend of the dedication, including from almost every lodge in the town. And about 1,000 people filled the church on the morning of the dedication. It was an event for the entire community, and the church only listed less than 300 members on its roster at the time. And one of the records says that just talks about Mrs. Robbins, one of the principal workers in the movement for the church, an earnest, sincere, consistent Christian woman, and a successful Sunday school teacher. Says she worked unceasingly for the promotion of the church and the church's interests, an outstanding Christian woman who undoubtedly influenced the future lives of more children in Auburn than any other person of that period. The turn of the century, there are 413 members in the church. The Methodist Church also partially responsible for the prohibition in the town of Auburn, starting in 1908, 1909, all the way up until 1933. There was no legal sales of intoxicating liquors in Auburn, and the Methodist Church members were part of that. And then here you see some of the membership records. There's a picture of Reverend Thornburg, the Scoutmaster, the first Boy Scout troop in Auburn in 1912, and there's a lot of success and great benefit for that organization. The Epworth League and Women's Foreign Mission Society, also some interesting records. Another revival in 1915, World War I in 1916 through 18. The church contributed 80 soldiers, 2 nurses, and a YMCA secretary to the service. And membership continues to boom into the 20s, where the church reaches 895 members. As we reach the end of the 1930s, we arrive at the 100th anniversary of the church with Reverend Claude Garrison, who with his capable wife inspired the church to new possibilities. The week of December 3rd through December 10th of 39 was a celebration of the anniversary, and placed a bronze tablet stating the facts on the original site of the church building, which now is apparently stored in the church building. In the 50s, the membership breaks 1,000, and the church starts to strain at the seams of this church that was thought to be too large only 70 years ago. Also in 1957, Pastor Lorraine comes from Elsden Methodist Church in Chicago and talks about the experiences of a lady minister. And there's just some neat program documents from that period of time. In the 60s and 70s, the decision's made to build a new church. So here are some of the interesting architectural records and renderings from that time. And now might be some of the scaffolding that's recognizable. In 1971, on the day of the cornerstone laying ceremony, the church was going to that occasion and was told that they couldn't leave out of the east steps because one of them had collapsed. So although there had been some debate about building a new church and the necessity of that, everybody was kind of laughing and saying, I guess we did the right thing. And on November 21st of 1971, the new church building is consecrated at its current location. So there's just kind of a cool part of the booklet to commemorate the consecration. And as a final note, one of the records says, this has been a chronicle of the stones and mortar of the houses of worship, but the real history of Auburn Methodism over the past 132 years obviously lies in the faith and the work of each minister and member, and in the services offered to the congregation and community, reaching out and ever developing to meet the needs of the times. So that concludes just the short history program on the Methodist Church. and we're glad to be able to contribute some to that. Again, the historical materials in this program were digitized as part of the State Library's LSTA grant to us, with major help from Sharon Zonker and Lindsay Miller. Over 800 photographs, documents, and records of those histories are now available at the Genealogy Center and the Eckert Public Library Online Photo Archive. So there's some notes about the book records from Dave Kurtz and Sharon Zonker. They're also there to review. And credit for the program goes a lot to Chelsea Dant, Thomas Irwin, Melissa Reno, Sarah Adams, Katie Knutson, Matt Johnson, Alan Sweeney, and Jenny Kobiela-Mondor, who did most of the legwork for this major project. And special thanks to Lindsay Miller and Sharon Zonker for inspiring this project and really, really helping out to make this possible. So come by and visit us at the Genealogy Center for any of these materials, or check them out online. Call us with any questions if you have more interest in how deep these roots grow.